Welcome to Navigating a Broken Vessel. I'm Dave Harris, and I want to welcome you to this episode. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I want to take from what I've seen from firesides I've been to things that general authorities have said, things like that, which is this idea of why I believe. And so that's what this episode is all about, is I want to explain why I believe. And what is it that I believe in? It's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the teachings of Jesus Christ as taught in the doctrines of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as well as my faith in Jesus Christ, my thoughts on the future, my thoughts on eternity, and things like that. So I want to take this time to explain some of the history in my life for what has caused me to have a testimony of the gospel of Jesus Christ, of the atonement of Jesus Christ, and so forth, even though my life is not all just perfect, right? It's not like this perfect fairy tale of things just happening perfectly. So even with things not working exactly as I myself think I wish I would have had them happen, I still am okay with things. So let me back up by giving a little bit of history about myself, about my beliefs, and so forth. I was born in Southern California in 1977, and growing up in Orange County, California, I was able to have a decent upbringing. It was pretty cool. We lived in a town called Irvine. That's where my family lived. I'm the third child in my family. I've got two older brothers. I have a younger brother, a younger sister, and then a baby brother as well. So I've got two older brothers. I've got two younger brothers. Then in between those two younger brothers, I've got a younger sister. Grew up in Orange County, California, and at that time, from 1977 until I moved away from Orange County in 1991, it was a really cool place to live. There was not a lot of people there, relatively speaking, of course, right? I mean, there were still quite a few people there, but with regard to living in Hurricane, Utah, which is where my family moved to in 1991, there definitely was a lot fewer people in Hurricane, Utah. Now, Orange County, California, particularly Irvine, the city of Irvine, I found lots of farmland around me, lots of orange groves, lots of strawberry fields, other things that would have been growing around that time. And it was fun. We meaning my friends, my brothers, and so forth, we'd get on our bicycles, we'd roam around and have some fun doing things all around the different city. Sometimes getting into trouble, sometimes getting into mud pits and making mud and stuff like that in the farmland and building BMX tracks and things like that. Now, early on in my childhood, would have been probably 8 years old, maybe 9 years old, somewhere in that area. I had an experience that it's not a spiritual experience, so don't go that direction. But bear with me on this one. I had an experience where I witnessed something that kind of, I mean, it affected me. It really did. It affected me. Let me give you a little bit of background with this story. So I lived near railroad tracks, and the railroad tracks would have trains on a regular basis, freight trains and Amtrak passenger trains and so forth. And over the top of these railroad tracks, there was a footbridge, right? It wasn't a vehicle bridge where cars would go, but it was a footbridge, and it was made out of wood. And it was kind of, even though it wasn't really the oldest bridge, it kind of felt that way. It just felt like it kind of shook a little bit when trains would go underneath it, things like that. So what was nice, what was fun as an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, somewhere in that area, would be to be on this footbridge and just look at the train as it's coming toward the footbridge to go underneath it, and just kind of watch it and feel it and listen to the sound and the noise and feel the vibration and things like that. And I was always told if you just stared at the headlight of the train, it would just look like it was coming right toward you, right? That was the idea. It's like you just stare at it and it would look like it was coming right toward you. So here I am. It's getting to be maybe an hour before dusk. So it's late in the afternoon. And I see a headlight at the top of this footbridge. I look down the rails of the train tracks and I see a headlight from a train. And I'm like, oh, right on. This is going to be perfect. So I did what we always did, right? And I stared at that headlight of that train as it came closer. And while staring at that headlight of the train went underneath the bridge and stopped. And that was strange that it stopped because the trains, they have no reason to stop there. They've never stopped there before. There's absolutely no reason for the train to have stopped. And then it did something even stranger. It started to reverse. It started to go backwards. It went back underneath the footbridge where I was standing. And once it reached the other side of the footbridge, it stopped again. And then it just stayed there. Now, my friends, my brothers, we were just kind of there looking around at each other like, what have we done? Right? That was immediately what we thought, is that we must have done something that caused the train to stop, and we're going to get in trouble because of something we did. And one of the older friends of mine, kind of the voice of reason, said, I mean, all we did was look at the train. There's nothing we could have done. But as we moved from the middle of the bridge to one side of the bridge, there's a big line of trees that blocks your view of the other side of the trees. So I could see the railroad tracks, I could see this line of trees, but I couldn't see what was on the other side of the line of trees. But as we moved off to the side of the bridge, I got to where I could see the other side of the trees, and there were red and blue flashing lights. We could start to hear sirens. There were red flashing lights and fire trucks and all kinds of stuff that were coming and parking near where that train had stopped. And so now we really thought we were in trouble, because now we see the police cars, we see the fire trucks, and we thought, what have we done? I don't think we threw anything at the train. I mean, we thought we've done nothing, but we were still scared. Come to find out, the same friend that kind of was the voice of reason, he walked all the way down, and it was probably 300 feet. When I say all the way down, it wasn't terribly far, but it was about 300, maybe 500 feet away. Walked down, talked to a police officer, and came back. And what he said was that a person had been sitting on the tracks, and the train hit that person. And that's why the train stopped, of course. And so now they're tending to this person and the situation that happened with that. And I've thought about that a lot over the last 40 years. I don't, in my mind, at least 40 years later, I don't recall much of seeing anything. However, my eyes were staring at the train, right? I mean, I did not take my eyes off that headlight. And even though I didn't see anything specifically out of the ordinary, it's not something I can replay in my mind and try and look and say, did I see something there? I know that I saw this situation where this train hit this person. And even though I don't have a conscious recollection of it, I know that it's something that I saw. And I think a lot about that because there are things in our lives that happen that shape who we are, that shape how we deal with things, and so forth. Now, I don't tell you that as a spiritual thing, right? It's not like I thought, oh, wow, what about this idea of death, right? And that started me having me think about death. Nope, it wasn't that at all. It's more just this experience I had that involved death, that involved clearly a person committing suicide as well. And that's the hard part about it too. And just contemplating in my life and in my mind how these things have affected me, both in my mental and my spiritual ways of thinking. Now, having said that, I'm going to tell one more story that's relative to that, and then I'll start talking about spiritual experiences and other things that I've had. When I was 14, my family had just moved to Utah. So I was living in Orange County. That's where the train incident happened. And we moved to Southwest Utah, a town called Hurricane. And actually, when we first moved there, we moved to the sister city of Hurricane, which is a town called Laverkin. I lived there, and yet I was going to church and Boy Scouts at a Hurricane church. So my brother Matt, who's 2 years older than me, and myself, both being 16, he was 16, I was 14. We both had these activities we would go to in Hurricane because that's the ward we were going to be moving into. So he was driving, 16 years old. He was driving from Laverkin to Hurricane to a Boy Scout activity that he and I both were participating in. We had just entered the town of Hurricane, and it was a 2-lane road. It was 1 lane in each direction with a center lane that would be used for turning. So you could think of this then as being 3 lanes, one going one way, one going the other way, and then the center lane, which could be used by either bits of traffic to make a left turn. I was reading something. I had my face down. I was reading something, and all of a sudden, my brother Matt, who was driving, began. I'll just put it. He began to vocalize. Maybe I could just put it that way. He was saying words that he would not normally say in a situation where we're just driving to Boy Scouts. Words that directed my attention upward to something that he was alerted to because he was the one driving. As I looked up, I saw in the opposing lane of traffic, the lane of traffic going the other direction, I saw a child who had to have been, again, the same idea of, 8 or 9 years old, maybe a little younger, maybe 7 years old. Anyway, about that same age that I was when the train incident happened. Anyway, he was standing in the right in the middle of the lane where the cars were coming the other direction, and there was a car that was coming toward him. And this one I have a very conscious recollection of, extremely detailed in my mind as to what I saw. He was turning to run back toward the shoulder of the road, and the car hit him. And after the car hit him, he tumbled a little bit and ended up on his back in the road, and that's where he lay there. And I can tell you that the speed limit on that road was 30, and I anticipate then that the car that hit him was probably going 30 or 35 miles an hour, somewhere in that area, maybe a little less, I don't know. But that's a pretty decent speed. Definitely not, huge, not like the train, but definitely fast enough that it was going to hurt this poor child. Now, in my young mind, 14 years old, my immediate thought was, well, that's kind of poopy. Oh, well, we've got a Boy Scout meeting to go to. Matt, let's keep on going. That was the way I thought about it. Matt pulled over, and when he pulled over, I thought, that's in my mind, I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that's probably a better idea. We probably should stop. So it's weird what you think about when something like that happens, where for me, it's kind of like, oh, that's no fun. Let's just keep going. We got a meeting to go to. Anyway, so he pulls over. I get out of the car. I could see people in front of their homes. They looked like they were gathered. They said, what happened? They yelled, what happened? And I said, you got to call the police. Kid got hit by a car. And then Matt and I ran over to where the child was laying. And Matt had some CPR, some medical knowledge, not a lot. He's 16 years old, but had some. I had learned basic first aid. I was a Boy Scout, right? Basic first aid, things like that. And what's fascinating for me is that, like, I didn't even think about that. It's just like, oh, that kid got hit by a car. Oh, well, we've got a meeting to go to. Like, I look back and I'm like, why did I not think, well, we should stop and render aid? While we were standing there and the boy is sitting or laying down in the middle of the road, my thought was not, oh, we should render aid. It was just like, well, we'll wait for the ambulance to get here. We'll wait for the paramedics, the police, whoever. They'll be the ones to render aid. And for me, it was, I'll just make sure the traffic doesn't hit him. The cars that are continuing to drive by, I'll just make sure that, I'll stand here where they will know not to drive in this part of the road. So we stood there. Matt did go and see if he could feel a pulse from this boy. Couldn't feel a pulse. I remember seeing small saliva bubbles coming out of his mouth. So he wasn't breathing at all or very well at all. And I remember some blood coming from the back of his head and starting to pool on the white stripe of the road, the white stripe on the right side of the road where his head was laying. And it was weird and surreal looking back because, again, I'm 14 years old, so this is now what, 35 years or so ago. Even looking back, I still remember those images vividly. I remember standing there and thinking, why did I not do something? Why didn't I work to help this child, render first aid, CPR, mouth to mouth, whatever might be helpful while we're waiting for the paramedics to get there? And I didn't. That's all there is to it. So pretty soon the police come, the paramedics come, they work on the boy, they get him onto a stretcher, they take him to the hospital, and he passed away. He died, and that was hard. That was harder than the train experience, because the train experience, although it's the same outcome, it's different because I don't have a conscious recollection of seeing what happened with the train, where I have a very, very vivid image in my mind of what happened with this little boy. And the biggest thing I remember about this was seeing that child's mom, who arrived on the scene right as the paramedics were taking care of the boy and putting him into the ambulance and so forth. And I will never forget her face. It was a look of horror. It was a look of fear, things like that. And that is a face I'll never forget. I'll never forget. So here I am, moved to a new town. This has happened. I don't remember who it is. I don't remember who the family was or anything like that. But yeah, it was hard. Those two things in my life, I know have an effect on my spirituality. I know they have an effect on my mental health. I really do. I know that subconsciously they make me a part of who I am, and that's all there is to it. So those are two events in my life that I think have been big, I guess, large scale events who have made me who I am. And now I want to shift into talking about this idea of why I believe. So even though these things are taking place and I'm seeing these things and so forth, I have knowledge of God and I have a belief in God. And I know that even though these things happen to these people, whether their own choices or whether not their own choices, I know that there are reasons why these things happen in the world. I know that there are things that happen to me that have reasons as well. And so I want to tell these stories about how I've seen how life has been fragile for people and how these things have affected me. All right. In terms of my spirituality, I'll give you a little bit of history there as well. I was born to parents who were both members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They have been married in the temple in Idaho Falls, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints temple in Idaho Falls, and they were sealed together. And so, for me, I was born into a family that have parents who are sealed, therefore I'm sealed to my parents and so forth. They call it born in the covenant, right? That's what they call it in the church. So I was born in the covenant. What that means then is that my life has been spent going to church. I've gone to church my entire life, and I have not spent a tremendous amount of time researching and going to other churches. I do have a fair amount of knowledge of other belief systems. I know how other people believe. I know how folks that work with Judaism, Islam, things like that. I've researched those religions, but I haven't taken a serious effect of saying, well, I'm going to go and worship with fellow Jewish folks or Muslims and so forth. But I have researched those sorts of things. My whole life then has been spent as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was baptized when I was 8 years old, which is the earliest that you can be baptized into the church is 8 years old. I was baptized at 8. I remember my baptism. I can tell you that I don't remember it very vividly like I do of this 14-year-old story where when I was 14, I saw the child get hit by a car, but I can tell you I do remember being dressed in a suit. I do remember wearing white. I do remember sitting on the front row. I do remember my dad being there, right? So there are things I remember about my baptism that are, still somewhat vague in terms of me being relatively young. Now, I was in Orange County till I was 14. So I spent time in Young Men's is what the organization is called, the Young Men's Organization, going to Boy Scout activities and so forth for 2 years before I moved away. In that time, I can tell you that basically from the ages of 12 to 14, as I've talked about in previous episodes, I was in middle school and those were some tough years for me. 2 years that were challenging in terms of, being a member of the church in my middle school where there was only one other person that I know of who was a member of the church at that middle school. Having a belief system of full-on Christianity, trying to be good, trying to be moral, trying to be pure, trying not to say mean things or talk dirty or look at porn or all the other things that people my age did, right? And so because of that, I was a bit kind of an outcast, but part of it I think might just be that I'm also just a quiet person, relatively introverted. But the difference is that on Tuesday nights or Wednesday nights when we would have these young men's activities, I felt like I was with people who were like me. And because of that, I felt a little bit more comfortable to a point where I was the one making fun of certain people within that group. I do have an episode about that where I talk about bullying. I have the full story about that on that episode, but that is part of my experience in terms of interacting with the church is both being bullied for my belief system and also bullying other people and being kind of a jerk to people. And so some of those things I look back on where I think, wow, that age was hard. I didn't like being bullying or being a bully. And then also at the same time, I think, wow, that was hard. I wish I wouldn't have been a bully to these couple other people that went to these out activities with us. And I could tell you that one of these people that I know of has stopped going to the church, isn't a believer anymore, and I feel like I'm responsible for that. I don't think it was only me; there were other people that were involved, but definitely I have that sense of responsibility. And because of that, I think again that drives who I am and how I act and my belief system. When I was 18 years old, I was living in Utah. I had friends who were good members of the church, good examples, people that were making good choices, people, not getting into drugs and alcohol and tobacco and all the other stuff that would be involved with that. I had good friends. And I feel blessed because of that, because friends are huge, right? I've said it before, I'll say it again, right? You show me who your friends are, and I will show you what your future is, right? Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future, right? The importance of making good friends. So I had a set of good friends. We called ourselves the men. That was it. And these good friends were people that helped me to make good choices, right? And I'm not saying I was perfect, right? We would ditch out on church activities just like we would ditch out on school things and other things. I mean, we weren't perfect, but we had testimonies. All of us had testimonies. Of that friend group, the vast majority went on missions at age 19. Now, I was the youngest in that friend group. Everyone left on a mission before me, and it was now my turn to determine whether I wanted to go on a mission. I was baptized at 8. I had parents who grew up in the gospel. I had a good friend group, and I just kind of felt like, yes, a mission is what I should do. But I wanted to be sure. I prayed about it. I looked up scriptures, and I felt that I should go on a mission. And I find that fascinating looking back because that's another thing that was a big influence for me. I remember I was living in Logan, Utah, going to university, and because I had a whole year before between the time I graduated from high school to when I would be turning 19 to go on a mission, and I did a year of college during that time, kind of about a semester and a half or so before dropping out. However, it was at that time living on my own and determining then whether I should go on a mission where I felt like I should take this seriously. I read the entire Book of Mormon. I prayed whether I should go on a mission. I read scriptures and determined based on that that I needed to go on a mission. It was a spiritual experience for me. It wasn't huge, but it was a spiritual experience for me. Now, I was called to the Wellington, New Zealand mission, which I thought was fantastic. New Zealand is a beautiful place. I love New Zealand. If you recall a previous episode, an episode or two ago, maybe 3 episodes ago, actually, it's the one we haven't released yet. Good gracious. We actually recorded it. You'll see it in an upcoming episode. I'll visit with someone who lives in New Zealand, who is a friend of mine who happened to be here visiting in the US, and I was able to talk to her. I love New Zealand. I love it. Called to New Zealand. I had my farewell and went to the MTC. Started my mission June 12th. of 1996. I still remember the date, June 12th, 1996, went into the Missionary Training Center in Provo and spent 2 weeks or so in the Missionary Training Center. It was in the Missionary Training Center that I had, up to that point, and really probably from that point till now, the most spiritual experience I've had in terms of spirituality, in terms of testimony building, and so forth. So I want to share that with you. This why I believe this is really the crux of it. All of these things building up to who I am. This really is probably the main thing I would say as to why I believe. I was sitting in a class at the MTC, and in the class we were learning as missionaries how to give. Back then they were just called the discussions, and there were 6 discussions that we would have with potential investigators to the church, people who might want to be baptized in the church. We would have these 6 discussions. They were planned meetings with curriculum, essentially, that we would talk about and ask questions and things like that. The first of these discussions starts talking about God, then talks about Jesus Christ, then talks about Joseph Smith, and then talks about the Book of Mormon. That's the first discussion. I remember in this class with all the other missionaries around me, and there was a teacher in the class who was teaching us how to give the first discussion. And as part of that teaching, she gave the first discussion. She essentially presented the first discussion to us. And I remember sitting there quietly, she'd ask questions and maybe I would answer, maybe others in the room would answer. But I remember just kind of sitting there, kind of thinking, yeah, this is cool. I'm learning about the first discussion. She got to the discussion area, the point where we were talking about Joseph Smith. And she set it up, talking about how Joseph Smith was, questioning which church he should join. And he just had a lot going on in his mind, trying to figure out what God would want him to do, which church he should join, and so forth. And she then gave the account, which is just a few sentences about the vision that Joseph Smith had. The first vision is what we call it, right? And as I'm going to say the words, we'll see if I can remember them, right? It's been a long time since I've given the first discussion, but I'll say the words that I remember hearing. And I can tell you that while I was hearing these words, I had the most powerful, undeniable experience. I felt the strongest impressions of the Spirit of Heavenly Father that I have ever felt in my entire life. And so here are the words that she said. This is straight out of the first discussion. And this is her now quoting Joseph Smith. He said, "I saw a pillar of light exactly over my head, above the brightness of the sun, which descended gradually until it fell upon me. When the light rested upon me, I saw 2 personages whose brightness and glory defy all description standing above me in the air. One of them spake unto me, calling me by name, and said, pointing to the other, This is my beloved Son. Hear him." Even as I say those words, I still feel a little hint or a glimmer of that same feeling I had at age 19 in the MTC in Provo, learning how to be a missionary. That handful of words has struck deeply in my mind, to the point where every time I've ever heard those again, whether I was giving a first discussion, whether another missionary was giving the first discussion, whether I've heard an account similar to that situation where people were just talking about Joseph Smith's first vision, and I hear that quote or something related to it, I hearken back to that time in my life. That was absolutely positively the most powerful, undeniable testimony I've ever had. Now, I look back and I think about my life. I think about my progression. I think about everything I had done up to that point. I hadn't really been the best member of the church. I hadn't attended every single meeting that I should have. I didn't memorize the articles of faith. I didn't do things like scripture mastery, where you memorize scriptures so that you can pass them off. I did participate in seminary courses, but not really like fully, like full all in kind of a thing. But I did read the Book of Mormon and pray about it. I did pray about whether I should go on a mission, and I feel like I got an answer that said yes. And so I look at these experiences in my life, things that have affected me, things that have been tragic, things that I've witnessed that have been tragic, all to a point where I now sit in a room in the Missionary Training Center listening to a teacher who I still remember what she looks like, but I don't know who she is or what her name was. I can't remember, giving that first discussion and feeling that impression, that experience. It's like I look back and I think, if I hadn't have decided to go on a mission, if I hadn't have prayed about the Book of Mormon, if I hadn't have gone to my young men's activities, like, do you have all these things that lead up to an event in your life that becomes unmistakable proof in my mind? I have no other explanation for that. I can tell you, because of that experience 35 years ago. Wow, I guess 30 years ago. 30 years ago, I'm 49. I was 19 back then. There you go, 30 years. That experience 30 years ago has been the foundation, the thing I look back to, the reminiscing that I will always do about that feeling that I have had in the past. And that has been something that has carried me for the last 30 years. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue on today. But I definitely want to tell you that. Now, fascinating for me is that the teacher in that course, that class at the MTC, who had just finished talking about that, she said to me, she looked at me and said, "Elder Harris, I'd love for you to tell me how you feel after I say those words." And I remember, like seriously, I was like still a little bit kind of like, whoa, wow. And so I shared what I felt. But I look back at that too, and I'm like, wow, of the 15 people in the room, she looked at me and said, "Hey, Elder Harris, why don't you tell us how you feel?" And I could tell you, I felt it. I felt it. And it's not surprising to me. I have no idea what my face looked like. Maybe she looked at my face and like, wow, that guy's feeling something. I don't know. Or if she's just like, yeah, I'm going to call on him, or whether she felt impressed, I don't know. But I was able to share that experience with other people in the room. And I remember saying, I've never felt anything like that before. That was really cool. So, with that in mind, now I want to talk about everything from that point forward and why I still believe. So, right, that to me would answer the question, Dave, why do you believe? So, when I say why I believe, it is because of that experience. However, there have been many things that have happened since that time, right? Now, the most fundamental thing, which I've alluded to and talked about on previous episodes, is that I was only on my mission for 1 year. And the reason why I was out there for 1 year is I just struggled constantly. Mental health, feeling like I was not good enough, religious OCD, right? This idea of scrupulosity. These are things that I felt. I just felt like I shouldn't be out there, that I wasn't good enough, that I was falling into sin constantly, that I was, that's it. And so I came home a year early. I've talked about on our second episode, Shelly and I talking about how we met and so forth. That was in a church congregation, right? So I still went to church even though I came home early from my mission, and that might be something that might dash a person's testimony. I still went to church. That's where I found Shelly. That's where we interacted. We continue to go to church. We've been active in the church for the last 30 years, 25 of which 26 now that we've been married. But we've known each other for a couple years before that. We've been active. We've been trying to do what is right in terms of making the best decisions we can for us and for our family as well. It has not been easy. Any of you who are longtime listeners or viewers of this podcast know about the struggles that I face with regard to mental health, things that have been challenging for me. And again, you might look at that and say, those are things I would think that might be testimony destroyers or things that might try a person's faith. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. There are many times where I look back at the mental health struggles I have, and then I also look back at this strong impression that I had at age 19 about the truthfulness of what I heard about Joseph Smith actually seeing two people, one of them being Heavenly Father, one of them being Jesus Christ. And I look at that and I say, I have been blessed with what I need, exactly what I need to continue to have a testimony, even though things are not perfect, right? It's not a fairy tale. It's not exactly what I would love it to be. There are many times where I will talk in my church classes, right? In elders quorum or Sunday school, my interactions with other people, having conversations with you all here on the podcast, talking about how I know that these struggles that I'm going through, these things that are a challenge for me, are designed specifically to, one, try my faith, and two, to keep me humble. I have no doubt. Now, I wish I didn't have to be compelled to be humble, right? That's what it says in the scriptures, right? He who is compelled to be humble, right? That's not a good situation to be in. I wish I didn't have to be compelled to be humble, but I get it. I get it, because if I didn't have these mental health struggles that I deal with all the time, I don't know where I would be. I might feel like I'm too good to be a member of the church, that I'm too good for the gospel, and so forth. And so I actually thank my Heavenly Father for these trials and for these experiences, because I know that they're making me a better person. It's not to say that I don't sometimes wish I didn't have to do them. I definitely get frustrated sometimes. I remember many conversations with Shelley that I just am like, I'm tired of this. I wish it didn't have to be that way. But at the same time, I have been blessed with experiences like the one at age 19 that keep me going. Even when it is as challenging as I've ever had it be in my life, I can keep going, and I just keep on trying to do the best I can, going to church every Sunday, trying to live the commandments, trying to be a good example to my wife, to my children, to other people around me, trying my best to do the best that I can do. And I can tell you that I have been blessed with experiences since that time 30 years ago. I'm not going to share them on the podcast. They're personal for me, but I can tell you that I have been blessed, richly blessed with spiritual things that are amazing experiences, things that I will hold dear to for the rest of eternity, right? The rest of my life. Uh, and those are things, again, I would love to share them with you and say, hey, let me give you the full definition of why I believe. But I just want to leave it at that I have had things that have happened that I think, wow, this just reinforces these blessings, just trying to do what is right. So I'll give the same disclaimer, right? I'm not a mental health practitioner, and you should definitely not take any of this as mental health advice. But I definitely, would say seek out a professional if that's what you're wishing for. But at the same time, I would also say that if you have things in your life that are holding you back from gaining a testimony, from having an experience or a series of a series of experiences that can shape who you are in a positive way, I would say I'm not a bishop, right? And talk to your bishop, right? That's the professional, right? So I would give the same disclaimer, right? I'm not a bishop. I'm not a mental health practitioner. I'm not a bishop, right? You should seek out a professional mental health counselor, practitioner, and so forth. And if you have spiritual things that are holding you back, talk to your bishop. Find out who your bishop is if you don't know who they are, and talk to them, right? Talk to them and say, hey, I've got things that are holding me back. I can tell you, my entire life, 49 years now, this idea of why I believe, if if I had to answer that question with a single word, I would just say faith. Why do I believe? Faith. Because even when it's been so dark, I continue to have that faith and just keep on keeping on, trying to do my best, to a point now where I can honestly tell you that I know that Jesus Christ died for me, for my sins, and for not only my sins, but also those things that are challenging for me. I know that beyond a shadow of doubt. And that is because of these experiences that I've had. And these experiences have come because of faith. And that's all there is to it. All right. That's really maybe deeply personal. Maybe that's the idea behind it, but I wanted to share that and let me know what you think about that, right? Send me an email, dave@navigatingabrokenvessel.com. Go to our Facebook or Instagram, Navigating a Broken Vessel. Go to the website, look at previous episodes. Navigatingabrokenvessel.com is the way to go. I would love to hear about that for you, because I think the intersection between science and religion, when we talk about pure science and we talk about pure religion, it's funny how closely related those things are. And I think mental health, I think the way we think physically, mentally, spiritually are all interconnected and related. And I love every bit about it. I'd love to hear what you think about it. All right, thanks so much for joining us on the episode, and I look forward to talking to you on the next episode of Navigating a Broken Vessel.